6.2 is more solving trig equations. If you're not comfortable yet with 6.1, make sure you go through 6.1, do the assignment, ask me any questions before you hit 6.2. 6.2 is gets kind of intense because we have a lot more stuff to do in order to solve them. They're not kind of one-step or two-step equations. So we'll start off. So solve 2 cosine x minus 1 is equal to secant of x for all solutions. So really what's important here is to get one trig function, okay? We don't want to mess with 2 different trig functions because it's just pain in the neck. So I'm going to rewrite secant as 1 over the cosine of x. All right? And because this is a fraction, and because I can do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by cosine of x. Now, notice I put the 2 cosine x minus 1 in parentheses, and that's so that I know that this cosine of x goes to everything in here. Okay, so my left side becomes 2 cosine squared x minus cosine of x when I distribute through, and my right side just becomes 1. So I look like 2 cosine squared x minus cosine x minus 1 is equal to 0. Get everything onto one side. I want to get everything onto one side because this looks like a quadratic, okay? And it looks like a quadratic because you have a squared term, you have a regular term, and you kind of have like a bonus term, your constant. So if you're not comfortable in this form, and I recommend you doing this, is change it to something that you're a little bit more comfortable in with your algebra. So this can look like 2x squared minus x minus 1. So we're going to factor this because it's easier to factor, and how this factors will be how this factors, just with cosines instead of x's. All right. So 2x, x, 1. Okay. So 2x squared minus 2x plus x gives me negative x minus 1. So this factors just like this. So my cosine equation is going to factor as 2 cosine x plus 1 cosine x minus 1 is equal to 0. Looks great. All right, and then we're going to just solve these little mini trig equations, these little mini trig problems. So cosine of x is minus 1 is equal to 0. Cosine of x is equal to 1. That occurs in 2 spots, technically. It occurs at 0 and 360. I'm not specific here, so I'm going to do everything here in radian measure, and it wants it for all solutions. So I'm going to say x is equal to 0 plus 2 pi k. Now, I'm not going to put the 2 pi because it'd be a little redundant. So 0 plus 2 pi k, if I add a 2 pi to 0, that gives me 2 pi. So my one location that I'm going to count is 0. So that's one of my answers. And then 2 cosine x plus 1 is equal to 0. I'm going to solve this. I'll get 2 cosine x is equal to negative 1. Cosine of x is equal to negative 1/2. Like I said, I'm going to do things in radians. Okay, so cosine of x is equal to negative 1/2. That occurs in the second quadrant and in the third quadrant. In the second quadrant, that occurs at a 2 pi over 3. And because we want all solutions, I'm going to add plus 2 pi k. So that's 1. And then the other spot is going to be 4 pi over 3 in the third quadrant plus 2 pi k. Looks good. All right. Looks fantastic. Another note on this. If you wrote 2 pi plus 2 pi k, you wouldn't be wrong. It wouldn't mark you off, but it is redundant. And if you saw it again in some other form, they would only give you this one solution. They would only give you one option. So I just want you to be aware of that. as you're going through these problems.